I need love. I need life. I need to know that I have someone that I can love. Baby, you're the one I need. Can you make me feel the way I think you can? And girl, can you make me realize how good it is to be a man? Can you take the cold nights and make them seem so warm? Can you unfold mysteries and thrill me with all your charm? You're the one I need. You're the one I need. Girl, you're the one I need. Girl, you're the one I need. Is it possible for you to see the mistakes I've surely made? Give me an answer for each one so I can make the grade. Girl, can you see it's love I need? Can you see these things? And if you could, would you tell me? You're the one I need. Girl, you're the one I need. You're the one I need. Girl, you're the one I need. You're the one I need.
Who's friends with all the night dreamers talking to you at night? Gary on the radio, but maybe he's not inside. Bigfoot's on his tail, flying UFOs, that's right. Gary's talk show radio, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Dreamers talk show will fix your despair. If you want to talk conspiracies, Night Dreamers is for you. Top secret case, alien space, it's Gary with the news. Tune in on the radio, don't let Big Brother know. They're listening to everything, even Gary's late night show. If you need a friend to talk to, he will always be there. The Night Show Dreamers talk show will fix your despair, because Gary's talking to you at night.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on Night Dreams with Gary Anderson do not necessarily reflect those of the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, its hosts, staff, or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Listener discretion is advised. When the world sleeps, the unknown awakens. From UFOs to Bigfoot, time travel to the unexplained. This is Night Dreams Talk Radio, one of the fastest growing alternative talk shows covering all time zones and guiding you through the darkness, the legendary Gary Anderson. Are you listening? Because the night has a story to tell.
We are being visited, and like our oceans.
Well, JC, how are you doing? A day before Mother's Day, are you prepared?
I am prepared, and I'm ready to do the mother's thing, take the mom out, something to eat, and hopefully she has a good time.
Well, my wife today and my daughter, they went to Wally's World. That's Walmart. And they said that the stores are starting to be a little bit bare.
Well, here's a tip. A few days before any major holiday, do not go to that store.
Well, but here's the problem, is the container ships are not going in. You go in L.A., San Francisco, in Seattle, they got 1 or 2 ships from China logged in for this month, and that's it. And I told her, well, go buy a couple of big packs of toilet paper, because you know what happened during COVID. People were fighting. They were ready to, kill somebody over toilet paper.
Yeah, matter of fact, me and my sister, we did some, I don't know what you call urban baling of hay. We got a big old bale of that stuff from the old Costco, where I seen it look like the Kentucky Derby about 5 years ago when they rang that bell and they come around the corner pushing and shoving. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. But Mother's Day is tomorrow. So again, if you haven't got your mother something, well, shame on you. Take her out to dinner. Get her some roses. In fact, that's another thing. We went into, well, I'm not going to say the store, but they said that they over-ordered flowers this year. They bought like they did last year, but nobody's buying flowers for Mother's Day. They're stuck with hundreds and hundreds of bouquets of flowers.
Yeah, that's not something like, you can put on the shelf for half price a month later. It's got a short shelf life.
Ribeye steak at our local grocery store. You ready for this? $19.80 a pound.
Wow. I just bought pound hamburger for $2.49 actually.
Yeah, but where do you live?
I would live in beef country, or it would be a lot more.
Yeah, well, just think about that. If you lived in a, populated area on the East Coast or West Coast, like New York or L.A. or Seattle or you don't find that for that price.
No,
it's crazy. We're really going into uncertainty. And you ready for this? Amazon is getting ready the next day or two to double the prices on stuff.
Yeah, boy, they really cornered the market on a lot of stuff. I'll tell you, what are you going to do?
And it's hit and miss. If you order something, they cancel it because they don't have it, or the supplier don't have it. I ordered 2 things this week, 2 different things from Amazon, and they refunded my money. They said they don't have it.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard about the same scenario. That kind of reminds me of that. Remember with all the drones thing, the one governor said, well, we don't want to mess with it. It could be Amazon delivering drones.
Yeah, well, what are they going to deliver? Toilet paper? Well, yeah, anyway, tonight we got a news with Guy Ticker, and then we're going to bring our guests on tonight. We're going to talk about time travel. And boy, I want to go back to 1952. That's where I want to go. So we're going to talk about time travel tonight with our great guest, so stay tuned. We'll be back right after Guy Ticker with the news.
Diving into the headlines of the mysterious and unexplained, this is the Unseen News with Guy Ticker, where the extraordinary is just the beginning. Scientists studying alien mummies from Peru claim the bodies are 100% real after new details emerge. The alien mummies discovered in Peru have largely been dismissed as a hoax by the scientific community, but researchers studying the specimens believe otherwise. Dr. Jose Zalce, former director of the Mexican Navy Medical Department, has analyzed 21 of the strange bodies, finding fingerprints, bone wear, dental formations, muscular features, and internal organs, proving they're 100% real biological organisms. He even claimed some were pregnant, making them, quote, impossible to fake or replicate fraudulently, so said Zalce, who has testified under oath that the mummies are real following his 6 years of work with them. He estimated that the remains of a mummy named Montserrat are from 1200 to 1600 years old. Joyce Mantilla, a Peruvian journalist, believes the mummies are remains from an unknown species of hominin due to having some physical characteristics of a human, while its hands, facial features, elongated skull, and feet are completely different. Montserrat was found with a metallic-like object on its head that Mantilla said was placed on the body while it was alive. They have been placed on the skin using a technique that we still do not know, he said. In some cases, like Montserrat, the skin has been seen to have grown around the implant. This gives us the understanding that these implants were used while the subject was still alive. And that wraps up tonight's top news stories. I'm Guy Ticker on the Night Dreams Talk Radio Network. Tim R. Swartz is an Indiana native and Emmy-Award-winning television producer, videographer, and is the author of a number of popular books, including The Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla and Gef the Talking Mongoose. Tim is a contributing writer for such books as Brad Steiger's Real Monsters, Gruesome Critters, and Beasts from the Darkside, and Real Ghosts, Restless Spirits, and Haunted Places. Tim's most recent books, along with author Sean Casteel, are Weird Time, Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space, and Mimics, The Others Among Us. As a photojournalist, Tim Swartz has traveled extensively and investigated paranormal phenomena and other unusual mysteries in such diverse locations as the Great Pyramid in Egypt and the Great Wall in China. He's worked with major television networks, both national and international. He's also appeared on the History Channel programs Ancient Aliens, Evidence, Ancient Aliens Declassified, The UnXplained, and the History Channel's Latin America series Contacto Extraterrestre. His articles have been published in magazines such as Mysteries, Fate, Strange, Atlantis Rising, UFO Universe, Flying Saucer Review, Renaissance, and Unsolved UFO Reports. Tim Swartz is also the co-host of The Paracast with Gene Steinberg, which you can check out at www.theparacast.com.
Well, Tim, how are you doing this Saturday night, day before Mother's Day?
That's right. And Gary, thank you very much for having me on your show again. It's always a pleasure to come on talking with you.
Well, you might not be happy when I tell you that we lost your video feed. Not on your side.
Oh,
no, one of my devices was working fine before and now it's the camera quit working. So if you don't mind, we're just going to have you on audio. I'm going to try getting this working during the next break. But again, time travel, we're going to be talking about that. If we could go back in time, what time would you want to go back? What century, what year, and why?
Oh, gosh. I keep thinking that I want to see what the future has in store for us. I mean, you were talking at the beginning of the program about grocery stores becoming empty and shipping containers not showing up on either coast. So with all of this bad news that we're having now, I'm hoping that the future shapes up to be better for us. And I would love a sneak peek to see what would happen. But okay, if you want to talk about where I would go in the past, I suppose I would want to go back to probably the very beginning of humanity on the planet to see where we actually came from. because I do believe in evolution, but I do believe that the human species has been on this planet a lot longer than current scientists even dare to imagine. So I'd like to go back to maybe a couple of million years ago to see if there were actually high technology civilizations on the planet that existed before our own, that maybe some kind of cataclysm destroyed them, a la Atlantis, stories like that. But that's what I'd like to check out.
Well, if you really think about it, I don't think we have the technology to done the great pyramids or the Sphinx, or even the Maya civilization. They have had to have help. And why is there pyramids all over the world?
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder, maybe they had internet at that time also.
Well, and again, I wonder whether or not there wasn't a high technology civilization that existed long before the previous ice age, and that maybe the remnants of that civilization still existed in certain locations around the world, like Egypt, like South America and Central America, that tried to pass on that knowledge to a wrecked world, to the people that were still alive, but had basically reverted back to a more primitive stance. Because all of these civilizations have stories of gods or demigods, or people from the stars, or people from under the earth coming down and teaching things, mathematics, agriculture, things like that to these people, as well as how to build these huge megalithic structures. Something that we've lost that knowledge. I mean, some of these structures, especially in South America, we couldn't even build them with our modern day cranes.
That's the whole point. We don't have the technology. They just, in the last 6 months, figured out how the Romans made their cement. That is lasted as long as it has, because we haven't even had that technology. If we make something out of cement, as it ages, it gets stronger to a certain point. And then after a certain point, it starts crumbling. The Roman, with the cement they had, it actually got, as the centuries went by, it kept getting stronger.
Yeah, self-healing too, from what I've been reading recently. Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. And somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said that the ancients made these megalithic structures not because it was hard for them to do it, but because it was easy. So, that's something to take into consideration, because, modern day historians always like to show these pictures of thousands of slaves toiling away their entire lives, under whip, to build these structures for some egotistical king. But that's probably not the way it was. We know now that in Egypt that there were work crews that did it for pay. There were times of the year in Egypt where people really didn't have anything else to do. So that's when they were commissioned and brought in to help build these, the pyramids and other structures. Again, not because it was hard to do, but because it was easy.
Well, I still think that the gods weren't gods as what they thought they were. I think the gods were visiting this planet and jump-starting our planet.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, once again, look at so many of these ancient societies and their legends and mythologies, of the gods who came down from the stars to teach us things, to bring us out from that animal stage into conscious beings that not only conscious beings but creators. That's the big thing, that big evolutionary step for people, is when we went from just scratching around in the dirt to actually creating things. We became the gods ourselves. We became the creators.
But you know what happens when humans start thinking they're gods? There's a downfall of human society.
Yeah, well, and that was one of the, maybe it was like one of the stories from the Bible that wasn't included later on. But the story went that the Elohim not only didn't want Adam and Eve eating from the tree of knowledge, but they also didn't want them eating from the tree of life, because then they would become as gods themselves. And that was something that they couldn't have. The Elohim couldn't have, their creations being equal to them. So, and I think that's something that all of us need to think about, and our place in the universe and on this planet, is that, was there, or is there still some other race that is wanting to keep us down, that is well aware of what we are capable of, both destructively and as creators and as spiritual beings, but they keep us on this planet possibly. Maybe this is a prison planet.
I was just going to say that, because look at humans. We have two sides to this. We have love and compassion. And then we have, kill the neighbor next door feelings. I mean, again, ever since man's been walking on this planet, they have that kill switch in their minds. And that tells me we're not going to make it to the advanced civilization that to go out and conquer, other worlds, other planets. I just don't think we're going to have the capability. I don't think we're going to have the time at this rate. That's just me.
Well, I truly hope that we are able to overcome those base instincts. Because like you said, I mean, we have so many people who are capable of just absolutely wonderful, tremendous things. And then you turn around and then there are other people who seems like their only desire is to tear that all down, to rob us of any progress that's been made over the year for whatever reasons. Sometimes I think that they do it just for the heck of it, just that thrill of destruction. So it's a matter of I suppose who has the most chops. Who can outlast the other.
Yeah.
But I do think that people that good, that superior aspect of us, that part of us that is well aware of our role in this universe will prevail over time, but ultimately will prevail.
I hope so. And again, talking about time travel and stuff, what if you had the capability to go into a machine or sit in that chair and pull the handles back? Where would you like to go?
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, it would be fun to see where we came from. But then again, I suppose that I'd like to go and check out some of the mysteries of this world that we like to research and talk about. It'd be fun to go back to see to be around Mount Rainier in 1947 when Kenneth Arnold was flying around and see what he saw. Did he really see these flying crescent-shaped craft that he later said looked like rocks skipping across the surface of water, which then a reporter mistakenly referred to it as saying they look like saucers skipping across the water. That's where the term flying saucers came from. You know, or what about the Roger Patterson and Gilmore, I can't think of his first name now. The guys who took the film of Patty, the Bigfoot in Oregon in 1967. You know, I'd love to have been there as well to see if that actually happened or if it was a hoax. You know, all of these mysteries that we love to discuss. You know, it would be great to find out what actually happened.
It would be. You know, I would like to go back and talk to George Washington. I mean, you know, Abraham Lincoln, and just, you know, again, you know, but would we really want to go back in time? That's the whole thing. Like before we went on the air, a cabinet member under Trump came out and said that we have the technology to go forward and backward in time. And if you really think about it, there's people have been out there, time travelers that's been around for years, going back even, you know, when Art Bell had his show, he had a bunch of them on his show, you know, saying that they're from the future. But again, I'm still puzzled with that. I mean, if we have time travel, then they haven't really accomplished anything.
Or they've messed things up so badly that we are now off on some kind of wild branch of time that never would have occurred if it hadn't been for people messing with time. You know, I like to think that the universe has ways of smoothing things out, but really, you know, my own personal theories on the possibility of time travel, because a lot of scientists still like to bring up the grandfather paradox,
right? That
says that if that you can't travel back in time because, you know, you could do something that would mess up your own future, you know, i.e. going back and killing your own grandfather, thus you don't exist.
But would you know you never existed? That's the whole thing. But yeah, again, right. Depending on, you know, quantum physics and who you talk to and string theory, you know, again, if you went back in time, it opens up another dimension, another parallel universe. So you could be going back in time, but not actually going back in our time going back. You could be going back in a, you know, that's the part that makes you wonder.
Right. Yeah. And that's, you know, that's one of the ways that I think that the universe may be prepared to handle time travelers is that it will then create, you know, you go back in time, you know, kill your grandfather, and then that creates a new branch of timeline that goes off from that point, and you would never be able to return to your original timeline because you messed it up. Now you're forced to go off on this new timeline where, you know, you killed your grandfather. So now what's going to happen? You know, it's something completely different. Now, I've just been reading recently that some physicists have been entertaining the idea that the universe actually would never allow you to even kill your grandfather, that it would be stopped some way or the other. You know, you could go back into time and, you know, you could beat your grandfather and everything like that, but you'd never be able to kill him or do anything that would affect your original timeline because you going back in time had already happened. It was meant to be. So any changes that you may do when you're in the past have already happened. Now wrap your mind around that. It was meant to happen. It had already happened, so you're changing nothing.
Well, again, too, if you go into a parallel universe or it creates a bubble where you go into one, then you're whatever is happening is not affecting where you originally started from.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and see, I often wonder with time slips, and this is something that I've written about quite a bit, and you've had your own strange experiences, which could be a time slip, but rather than a time slip, I often wonder if a lot of these cases aren't more like alternate reality slips. That these people who have these experiences actually somehow manage to live, albeit temporarily, in a timeline that is parallel to our own, but with differences. Sometimes so close to our own that the differences aren't apparent. Sometimes they are. So rather than being the traditional where you think that you've entered the time tunnel and gone back into the past and had these experiences, you've actually entered a parallel reality, which may have its timeline may be a little bit slower than ours. So while you think you may have gone into the past, you've gone into a different reality that looks like our past. And, and then you can do whatever you want to. It's not going to affect your timeline, Emmy.
Well, here's the bad thing. If that actually exists, could you imagine you go out to the bar, you drink one too many beers, right? And then you go home. And, and you open up your door, you go upstairs, and your wife is in bed. And you go take a shower. I'm stealing this from a TV show, by the way. And then you come back and you say, honey, where's all my clothes in the dresser? Where did you put my clothes? And then she starts screaming, get out of my house. Who are you? That could happen. In some cases, it might be good it happened. But, I mean, really,
Well, and there have been reports of people having just very similar types of experiences. There's one woman, I can't remember her name offhand, who she came forward and said that she woke up one morning and she was living a different life. That her old life was gone. She still worked at the same place, but her job title was different. People that she worked with weren't there. There were other people in that. She was engaged to be married, but in her new reality, her fiance was gone. She never met him, and she said that she never went back to her old reality, and that the people that she knew and loved then have completely changed. Friends were changed. Some were the same, some were different. There were different people filling the roles of some of her old friends, and it's just a bizarre experience. And now a doctor would say, well, she probably suffered from a stroke or something like that. That just made her think, that gave her false memories. But from her reports, and of course, this was, you have to take this woman at her word for it, that she had herself checked up, no apparent signs of physical injuries or trauma or things like that. So, I don't know. And there have been others, very similar stories of people who have seemed to have left their original world and are now living in a new one.
That could have its benefits. You know that, Tim. Hey, Tim, we need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue on. And during the break, I'm going to try to get this camera going. So stay tuned. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio. Check out our website for more information at nightdreamstalkradio.com. We're going to be right back, so don't go anywhere.
free. Now, all you've got to do is say so. That's all. But when you feel cold, I'll warm you. When you feel can't go on, I'm coming home to you. Know that you and me forever.
Time slips. A haunted office building on a haunted street. A haunted coal town. Mysterious black cats. Unexplained light anomalies. UFOs, UAPs in the air and on the ground. Bridges in liminal spaces. Cryptids, shamans, and a werewolf. Disclosure. You don't need a ranch in Utah. All this and more happens in rural southwestern Pennsylvania. Now available on Amazon from author Kevin Paul. Politics and the Paranormal in Greene County, Pennsylvania. Read this captivating book as soon as you can by author Kevin Paul. Mark your calendar now. June 5th, 6th, and 7th at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's Alien Abduction Week on Night Dreams Talk Radio with the legendary Gary Anderson. Live on YouTube and streaming on all your favorite apps. 3 nights of chilling stories from guests who claim they've been taken by extraterrestrials and they're ready to tell all. It kicks off Thursday, June 5th, and runs through Saturday, June the 7th. You don't want to miss this one. It could be hair-raising, mind-bending, and just maybe the truth you've been waiting for. So don't forget, subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and join us live. We'll even be taking a few call-ins. You could be part of the show. Only on Night Dreams Talk Radio, where the strange is normal. You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, the home of Night Dreams Talk Radio, with Gary Anderson, syndicated worldwide. Paranormal Talk Radio, like you remember.
And we are back. I want to apologize to everybody. One of our cameras died, and I think I would have to, Tim, restart the computer to get it to come back up. And it's no way I'm going to redo that because we wouldn't be on the air. But, again, time travel. You remember like The Fly and all these movies on time travel where they try to go back in time and went forward in time and weird things could happen?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Now, The Fly, it was a teleportation device. But think about it, though. If you do have time travel, it's probably going to involve some kind of teleportation as well. Because the Earth is constant. Yeah, the Earth is constantly moving through space. The solar system is moving through space. The galaxy is moving through space. So if you're going to go back into the past, unless you've got some kind of teleportation ability with your time machine, you're going to end up in the middle of empty space somewhere.
Or in a beam. Think about that.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's that's why a lot of these stories that have come out over the years about alleged time travelers and their time machines, I always view with some suspicion, just because of the sheer computing power that's going to be required to to make sure that none of these awful things happen, like you said, end up in the middle of a steel beam somewhere rather than your intended location.
Again, I was just thinking, me and JC talked about this a few times. Like Star Trek, right? They're transporters.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever imagined they go down on a planet and a freaking fly lands on their shoulder, right, JC? And then they get all broke up, right? And then transported back on the ship. The writers never thought about that. They could have actually taken those type of shows so much more exciting. Captain Kirk with big eyes of a fly.
Or you have your girlfriend's hair on your shoulder when you go in, or some other bug, or God knows, it's endless ways, like you just said, you could have went with that.
Could you imagine JC going in and coming out as a cockroach?
Cock of the roach.
Yeah.
Cock of the roach, yeah.
Cock of the roach, yes. But, again, the risks of time traveling. We talked about Andrew, going up in that building, up in the elevator, and all of a sudden going back in time, or going to Mars, or wherever he went. I mean, I find it so intriguing that, some of this stuff is so intriguing that it has to be real.
Yeah, Andrew Basiago's story is very intriguing, and I know Andy, and I've known him for a while, and he talks about how the devices that were being used were based off of Nikola Tesla's technology, and that when he was doing it as a kid, which would have been in the 1970s, they had it all hooked up to a computer. But think about the computers that they had in the 1970s. You probably have more computing power in a pocket calculator now than they did then. Yet allegedly, they were able to accomplish some absolutely astonishing feats, such as teleportations to different planets and time travel.
So that's the part that confuses me, because I used to design at one point in my life computers. Mm-hmm. I worked with Dr. Wang. I worked on developing I was one of the first people to come out with an IBM XT clone back many years ago. Mm. But here's the thing. Back in that time frame, the computers were huge. And your watch has more computing power, your watch, than the computers they had back at that time frame.
Well, it makes you think that, okay, well, maybe time travel, if you are actually able to do it, then the other aspects of it aren't that difficult. And that now, you talked about somebody in Washington who said that, we now have the ability for time travel, both to the future and the past.
Yeah, which that's a government person. Now, are you going to believe somebody from the government?
I want to know what sources he's basing this on. Before I make any kind of judgment one way or the other. Okay, who told you this? And what was their source of information? But if people like Andrew Basiago are correct, then possibly we do now have time machines that you can fit on a watch. I mean, just like the science fiction, movies and television shows we grew up with. You've got people now who are like the time police or the time bandits. Considering the way the government is right now, time bandits may be more of an accurate term.
Could be.
But again, if people currently have that kind of capability, it boggles my mind whether or not they're actually mucking things up to a horrible degree. again, just like, we would see on some of our favorite old science fiction movies and television shows. I mean, could we right now be experiencing the ultimate in the butterfly effect, gone insane because of people messing around with time who really have no ability to think things through, just a bunch of stupid people traveling back and forth in time, stomping on butterflies in prehistoric times, and then coming back and are shocked by the damage that they've done to the future.
I would like to go back to the dinosaur time just to see what the Earth was like, when the Earth was still a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be so unique. Moving along, my friend, on his radio show back years ago, had Mr. Gibbs on, who claimed he invented a time machine. Now, when he first came on the first time, he never said, well, you had to kind of spiritually think about it at the same time, and you physically didn't go back in time. And Art talked me into buying one of his machines, and I didn't have the money for the expensive one. I got the one that was $250. And I sat there, honestly, Tim, should I take it apart or not? And, and Art said, well, no, I wouldn't take it apart. And I said, well, Art, have you plugged yours in? No, I'm not going to burn my place down. But I finally got to the point where I took it apart. I couldn't resist opening it. I wanted to see what this time machine was in this box with this wand. And when I took it apart, what I saw was a transformer in it. I saw some resistors, some capacitors, and some diodes. Okay, that it basically fed to this coil on a wand. Okay, which was nothing more than a degausser, which we were talking about before we went on the air. Back in the 70s, 80s, 60s, the color TVs, they were very susceptible. If you turned your vacuum cleaner off, for example, in front of it, your picture would be kind of hazy and not sharp and brilliant in colors. You had to periodically degauss it. That was his device. But a lot of people actually believed they went back in time. And that tells me that your mind has a lot to do with being the ability of maybe going back in time. I don't know.
Well, it makes me think because, allegedly the Philadelphia experiment, the original idea was that you would have like these huge degaussers around these ships, and that it would create I don't want to say electromagnetic fields, which is the opposite of degaussing, though. But okay, you have these electromagnetic fields that were supposed to get rid of these magnetic fields that would attract, say, like German and Japanese mines that were floating in the water to the steel hulls of these ships. And, once you degauss them, then they didn't have that ability. But apparently something happened with the way that they had this set up and the frequencies that were involved, and the side effect was either teleportation or time travel. So, was Stephen Gibbs trying to replicate this, but on a much smaller scale, but basically just ended up, like with a tape degausser?
I don't know, but it reminds me of another person Art had on the show. Madman, and I'm not going to mention his name, but basically went out and stole a whole bunch of power transformers. And thought by creating all this voltage with a massive amount of current, you could go back or forward in time.
Right. Yeah. This guy who lived in Missouri, he had been doing experiments, he claimed, using a Jacob's ladder. Now, a Jacob's ladder, and I know you know what a Jacob's ladder is, and you've seen them on the like Frankenstein movies and stuff. They're basically two wires with an electric current running up from the bottom to the top, like zap, like that. And he claimed that, and he said that he was using the power source from a laser disc player of all things, but that he must have made a mistake, because then it seemed to cause objects thrown through it to vanish and then reappear a few seconds later in a different part of his house. So, he got the bright idea that, well, maybe I could make it bigger and better. And that's where he decided that he was going to go to this lot where they had these transformers stored. And somehow, those things are heavy. They're big and they're heavy. I'd like to know how he managed to steal all those.
He had his friends. He admitted he had his friends
he must have had friends.
Yeah.
But then after he hooked this all up to his experiments, then he managed to blow out the power through a large section of the city that he lived in. So, and that gave it away. I mean, the police were able to track down where this came from, and he was arrested. And he admitted in court that he stole these things to further his time travel experiments. Now, of course, his detractors say that, well, he just used the time travel story to sound crazy, so maybe he would get a leniency in court.
Yeah, but why would, when you really think about it, Tim, why would he steal them? What motive would he have? I mean, is he going to be trying to create an ultimate lighter? I think
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he was trying to do something with it. That is very interesting what he was accomplishing. But even himself, he supposedly at one point got into it and got transported clear across the country. He didn't know who he was for a period of time. And then like a year or two later, he went back where his equipment was and nothing was there.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, he had just supposedly had just disappeared, and the place that he lived was he rented it.
Yeah.
So after he wasn't there to pay the rent, then the landlord just basically, cleared everything out and sold it. But by then he was, I think, in Ohio, where he said that he appeared after jumping through his larger version of his Jacob's ladder. So I don't know. It's an interesting story, and he obviously was conducting some kind of experiment. Like you said, that's a lot of power that you're going to be generating using that many transformers. So, and it's not something that that most people are just going to be stealing these transformers to, well, let's see if I could, amp up my stereo system, a little bit more with all this power. So it's a bizarre story, and but once again, like you said, why would you use the time travel story as a lie? Why not just come up with something else? Well, I stole these. I was going to sell them on the black market, but then I decided as a kick, let's just attach them all together and see what happens.
But he had no way to. I did talk to him back in 2018. He was going to come on my show, and then he disappeared. He went to Hawaii, and I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is he had no way to control. I mean, would you step in a device if you had no way to control what year you're going to go back? If you could even come back? I mean, you're stepping into the unknown. You could be going to, well, before even the Earth was created. Or you could be going to, well, when the Earth is cremated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the research that I did with this story, I never saw anything And I could be wrong. I never saw anything where he experimented with a living creature to see if it would come out the other side alive.
Oh, he did a cat. He did a cat.
Did he do a cat? Okay,
he did a cat.
Okay. And it came out in one piece without like fly eyes.
Well, he said that he said that the cat, if I remember, he put it in, and the cat appeared a few minutes later in a different location on the property.
Right. Which was what was happening with the inanimate objects that he was throwing into it. But once again, if you're dealing with time travel, all right, just because something appears then a few seconds later at a different location, since time is so weird, and you're dealing with time time travel, how long was it in that other state before it appeared back? I mean, it may be a few seconds to us, but for it could have been a million years. See what I'm saying with that?
Yeah.
With the cat coming back, the cat came back. When it did, that seemed to show that at least the cat was gone long enough that it was still alive. It didn't show up as just like, bones and fur.
Or how about like a bad barbecue?
Right.
Because you think about it.
Yeah.
Think about the foliage that was created, and also think about this: the current. The current is what burns things up. It's not the foliage. So if you got a lot of amps there, a lot of current, I mean, to step into something like that is, I can tell you, if he actually did teleport himself, again, across the country, he found himself in another, that tells you that also it's teleporting you to a different location too.
Right.
It's just not taking you back where you're in the same building 20 years or 30 years or forward or backward. He claims he was on the other side of the country.
Right. Yeah. But the thing about it is that he has no idea how long he was gone before he woke up, in that field. So, I mean, he could have been gone a lifetime, in a part of space-time, that part of space-time that is timeless. All right. So it could have been, for him, a million years, but it's timeless. So when you reappear, it's, you haven't changed, but your subconscious would be very well aware, that you have spent a million years floating in eternity someplace. That's a concept a lot of people have a hard time conceiving, that that time is probably actually a continuous state of now, that the past, present, and future that we think about, because we're trapped in the three-dimensional material world, that past, present, future doesn't exist. It's all just an eternal now. You think of, even though time isn't spatial, the best way to try to conceive it is like a three-dimensional world, that the past would be, to the west, the present is, here in the center, and the future is to the east. And that, if you rise above it, you can see it all at the same time. That's a very, very poor way to imagine it, but our feeble minds really just can't conceive how time actually is. You've had people who have had near-death experiences who have described the true nature of reality that way. And Nikola Tesla himself had an accident in his laboratory in Manhattan, where he said that for a brief moment he was outside of time and space, that he could see the past, present, future all at once, and that he had a better understanding of how the universe works. Naturally, when he came out, when his assistant knocked him out of it, he forgot all about it. But he was left with that idea that time was not as we think that it is in our three-dimensional reality. And he worked then, the rest of his life trying to come up with his own version of a unified field theory that he was never quite satisfied with. And of course, Einstein, worked for a long time and had published at least two different versions of his unified field theory, which he then would later pull because, again, he felt that they were incomplete.
Well, again, you mentioned, Tesla had that accident. But, I had two weird experiences. I died twice, December 6th. I mean, I was dead. They had to do CPR both times. And when I was dead, I didn't know I was dead, but how can I say this? All I saw was darkness. I didn't hear any talk of the rescue people, trying to bring me back. What I felt was so content that I thought I was part of the universe. And I felt like I knew everything. It's a weird feeling. And then they brought me back. And then on the way to the hospital, I flatlined again and died. And I went through the same experience. It was total darkness. And I felt so good. And I felt like I knew everything. And I felt like and I didn't want to come back. It was weird.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and, that convinces so many people who have had these experiences that, there is more, to us, to ourselves than what we think, with our, experiences here, in this reality. I've heard stories of other people who have experiences just like, yours, Gary. And, it started out in total darkness like that. But then as it progressed, they became aware of a light that then, transformed, itself, in front of them as it progressed, which, I don't want to say this, may have happened to you if you had been, deceased a little bit longer. But then again, a lot of other people don't even have what you had. Gary, they said that, they did not experience anything. So, what's the difference? What is the difference between the experience that you had and, say, somebody who had one that immediately, they were aware that they were floating up to the ceiling and then outward and, into the galaxy and then finally, into the summer lands and things like that, only to come back, even though they felt like that they had been gone for days, to come back and find that they had only been gone a few minutes.
Yeah, so, that's another thing. Yeah, what is time? When I was dead, it didn't seem like I was dead for a few minutes. You could have said, well, gee, you were dead for 2 years. I had no concept of time in reality.
Right.
It was really weird. Now, changing back the Philadelphia experiment, do you think it was a hoax, or do you think it was reality or something deeper?
I do think that something actually did happen. Whether or not it happened as the stories have now come to us, I have my doubts, because I know how stories can get embellished over the years. I mean, heck, when I was a teenager and first started reading about the Philadelphia experiment, it's changed a lot in that time to now. Now supposedly they have the name of the ship, the Eldridge, and you have stories about Nikola Tesla being an active participant in the Philadelphia experiment, and the stories of like Al Bielek and how the ship was actually transported through time as well as space, and that he ended up living a few years in the future, before he was able to be brought back. It's these embellishments that have been added on to it over the years that you really have to be cautious about.
Well, I did research on this. That ship though wasn't anywhere near there. That was the thing. It was somewhere else at that time. So
right, yeah, oh yeah. So I've always had my doubts that the Eldridge was a ship for just that reason. And again, I mean, that was something that came out probably from the book The Philadelphia Experiment by Charles Berlitz. But I've always had my doubts on the identity of the Eldridge. Now, the Eldridge may have been part of later experiments, because it's pretty obvious that it just didn't stop with whatever ship was being used for these experiments, because years later the United States sold the ship to the Greek Navy.
Right.
And the chief engineer of this ship, after it was owned by the Greek Navy, discovered that there were odd cables that were in the bulkhead of the ship that were not in the blueprints which he had of the ship when it was built. But here were these very I can't think of what the term would be, high capacity electrical cables, in this ship that seemed to have been added after its original construction, but again, with no apparent reason on why they were there. Now, who knows? It just seems to me that kind of odd that a ship that had been identified as at least being part of the Philadelphia experiment has these very high voltage electrical cables, in its hull, where they're not supposed to be. Why are they there? How did they get there?
Well, if that really did happen, then that's the proof we have that time travel does exist in one form or the other. But again, we evidently were not able to control it.
Then there are the stories that the Philadelphia experiment then morphed into the Montauk Project,
right?
Or what would it? That I think it was Project Rainbow. That may have been what its name was. That involved using people and enhanced psychic abilities to try to, amongst other things, try to achieve time travel. And that's something that I have run into time and time again. And I think you mentioned this to a certain extent too, Gary, is that the human mind, our consciousness, seems to play a very big role in how time travel could possibly work or not work. All right. You could build all kinds of fantastic technology that may be able to, in theory, travel through time, but it never does, because it requires a human, and our unique abilities, our unique place with our consciousness in reality and in this universe to actually make something like this happen. Maybe we're the batteries or the actual computer, that would make these things work properly. But I think without that human element, it's not going to work. And again, who knows? Because we're talking about a phenomena. It's like I said before with time slips. Are time slips actual time travel experiences, or are they interreality, parallel reality jumps? I don't know. I mean, it's just it's one of the big mysteries that has confounded me over the years, and I keep researching it, but then I get stories like yours, Gary, with you and your sons with the diner, which sounds on the surface like it could be a time travel event, time slip. But when you had the experience, did anybody come to you and say, "What's that weird car you're driving?"
Here's the thing, Tim. When this happened, I didn't realize what was going on. Again, the cafe we stopped was the one that when I was a young kid, my father and my grandmother, we would go to, Mount Rainier quite often during the summer in his Nash. And we would stop in this diner. And, he would have coffee, and I would have ice cream or soda or something like that. And when this happened with me and my two sons, we were driving down the road. There was like a reader board, a soda and hamburger for $1. And, when you have young kids, the first thing they see that, right? I'm hungry. You go in there. Right. And the first thing I started thinking, well, is there some type of car show around here? Antique cars? Because the cars were like early 60s, late 50s, mid 50s, that type of cars. And when we walked in there, here's the thing. They were wearing clothes like I remember my grandmother and my grandfather wore when I was like a teenager. They were like 20 years plus out of date in clothing. And they were staring at us. Mm. And I was kind of staring back at them. I wanted to get out of there like you wouldn't believe. But I have always wondered, honestly, what would happen if I would have stayed there a little bit longer? Could I have gotten trapped in that time zone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, did they accept your money when you paid afterwards?
When I handed them the money, I remember the lady to this day. She stared at it and gawked at it, and we walked out. Huh. She probably thought, "Oh my God, they gave us counterfeit money." But they were more like, again, they were staring at my car. They were staring at us because we were weird to them. Think about it. I was wearing bell bottoms and all that. Anyway, we got a caller. Who do we have out there?
Art.
Hi, Art. How are you doing on this Saturday night?
Oh, God. Great. And every time I'm listening to you, when I ask a question, you guys are answering it. It's just interesting.
Well, we read your mind. We read your mind, Art.
I know. There you go. My question is an interdimensional, in a sense, a time traveler, if it's non-human or human, what would that be considered a time traveling? Or if you can answer that question, that'd be great to understand what an interdimensional is. And I'll take it off the air. Thank you.
Okay, Art. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, again, I wonder whether, all right, since, naturally, we're going to be talking Earth-centric, because we haven't traveled too far away from planet Earth. So I think that for the most part, any encounters that we would have, with interdimensional or parallel realities are going to be basically ourselves within a certain, I suppose, parameter. And I'm struggling, for words here, within our own reality. And, I suppose the further away that you would get from this reality, the weirder things would get. But that being said, there is a consideration that, the UFO phenomena are time travelers. Now, time travelers from our reality, our future, or possibly even our past, but also probably time travelers from other worlds who are using time traveling as a way to travel the universe. And so then once again, if you're running into situations like that, then you're going to be dealing with interdimensional beings that are going to be closer to these aliens than they are to us. I think that could be, one possible explanation on why, when people happen to run across, say, a landed UFO and see the beings coming out, running around doing whatever they do, there's hardly any consistency in these reports. We have hundreds and hundreds of different reports of creatures that look different. They run the gambit from little guys to giants to, things with wings to, glowing balls of light. So, possibly that could be what is going on, that, I don't know, maybe, Earth is like the Disneyland of the alternate realities, that everybody wants to come here and visit for some reason, or possibly everywhere is like that these mysteries, these weird things that we are seeing happen everywhere, not just Earth, not just our reality, but everywhere. It's just part of the nature of things. That's a convoluted answer, I know, but I hope maybe I've come a little close to answering your question.
Again, too, Tim, when you think about time travel and you think about all these people that go missing on a regular basis, maybe the cases of these could be because of time travel, or like my thing, going back for a short period of time in a diner that no longer existed.
Well, you make a good point, because you had said that you had an uneasy feeling that if you stayed longer, that you perhaps wouldn't be able to leave again.
Yeah.
And that's common. I've heard that from other people who have had similar experiences. If they're not uncomfortable right from the start, it slowly creeps up on them to the point where it's almost like a claustrophobic type of feeling, that I've got to get out of here. If I don't leave now, I'm never going to be able to leave again. It's this visceral animal instinct, I suppose, to the strangeness of the situation, and possibly, with this subconscious realization of what's actually going on. It doesn't quite penetrate to your conscious, mind, but your subconscious is saying, get out of here now.
Well, it could be like, if you didn't leave, you could be like in a time bubble where it just keeps repeating itself, where you're trapped.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Which, it does make you wonder with some of these different types of time slip experiences, because there have been situations where different people have had the same experience at the same location and seen the same kind of things. So, I mean, are there, time bubbles floating around that that people can accidentally, under the right conditions, walk into and then walk out again, once the frequency, changes back. But then again, under the right conditions, somebody else can have this experience. Now, the people who are okay, there's a story that's going around right now about a gas station off of the interstate in Georgia, just south of Atlanta. And it started out with some girls who stopped, and the place was weird. The guy behind the counter was old and looked weird with hollow eyes that stared at him. The place was dusty and didn't look like it had been used for years. And then once they left, they kept driving up and down the road trying to get away, but found themselves going past this gas station again and again, like it was a loop, like an infinity loop that you couldn't get away from it. So now another listener to this story came forward and said that his dad had come home one night and said that he had seen the ghost of time travelers. He worked at a gas station off of the interstate in Georgia. And this would have been back, I think, in the early 70s. And unfortunately, this guy was a drinker, and his wife thought that he had fallen off the wagon again and took the children and left. But this guy always remembered this story that his dad had about the ghost time travelers at his gas station. And he said that he knew that they were real because when they left, they peeled out and left tire marks in the gravel in front of the gas station. So, was this guy, was that part of time trapped in a bubble? And everybody else, he went on and, continued, with his life on the timeline, but still there's this bubble of time that people it appears like that they're walking into and can become trapped in it for a while, because other people have reported they try to drive away, and no matter which direction they go, they find themselves back driving in front of this gas station.
Yeah, there's a story like a diner, the same thing. They head out, and all of a sudden, here they come. They didn't make any turns, but they come right back to that diner. No matter how they keep trying to get out away from that diner, they kept coming back. And again, it could be a time slip, or maybe some people out there, scientists, say that we don't even exist as what we think we are. We could be running in some type of, I don't know. That's interesting. But could you imagine you do go in a time slip and you go home and all of a sudden your 20-year-old wife is now 80. Could you imagine the shock of that?
Well, there have been a few stories of people who, they go out and disappear, never to be seen again. But then, 50 years later, supposedly appear on the street, shocked by what they're seeing and what's going on. And when the authorities question them, find their paperwork is indeed from the past. And I'm referring to a story that has come out of Ukraine, where this guy disappeared in the 30s and then apparently reappeared again. I think it was in the 60s. Was held by the authorities for a few days while his paperwork was being checked, but then vanished from the facility. And when they went and found this guy's wife, who was now considerably older, she talked about how he had come home one day and said that he had gone into the future and had come back with some information about what he saw, but then a few weeks later then disappeared again, never to be seen.
Well, you just opened up a worm right there. Let's say you could go in the future. 20 years, right. 30 years in the future, and you saw something bad, and you come back, would you tell people what you saw? Would you go up to the authorities? Would you go up to whoever, go to the news media and say, oh my God, life as we know it doesn't exist 30 years from now? Would you, right. What would you do?
Well,
write a book. I know that, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'd write I don't know if I would even do that, because as you know, Gary, I mean, I've had some strange experiences in my life, which I haven't really talked a lot about because of, the books that I write, the research that I do, because I don't want, people to say, yeah, well, of course, he's going to say that. He's a mystery monger. But the things that have happened to me, actually happened. However, if I did have something like that happen, I don't know. I doubt if I would talk about it. Perhaps with the hopes that if it was bad, that not saying something about it may stop it from happening. Because I just have the feeling that if you talk about bad things, then that's going to lead to them actually happening.
Or something bad could happen to you for talking about it.
Exactly. Exactly. The chandelier falls and crushes me.
Yeah. You get hit by a lightning bolt. Time traveler, if it ever became, or time travel ever became public, how do you think society would change? And would you think it would change overnight?
Mm-hmm. One of the things, and this is something that I wrote about in my book Weird Time, Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space, because you had a priest from Italy by the name of Father Unetti, who, with the help of some physicists, claimed to have built a device that he called the chronovisor, which said that you could tune in to past events and see things as they happen. But then after the church had initially funded this, then decided that that the device should be taken apart and they would store it in the Vatican's archives. And the reason being probably is that, and the thing would go with time travel as well, is that there would be no more secrets. Nobody would be able to keep a secret. And I'm not just talking about, like major secrets, no secrets.
Yeah.
You could have people finding out all of our, just normal everyday things that you don't want other people to know about.
Well, that's happening though, as AI is causing that to happen every day more and more.
Yep. Well, but what would that do to our society if you could go back and spy on anybody that you wanted to spy on and see their most intimate details and learn their most intimate secrets? Society would blow itself up, I think. We're going to have to be a lot more mature as a society, as a people, before time travel could become a thing for, I think, just that reason.
Well, it's the same way with ufology. I don't think we're going to ever be told the truth on that. But, there's time travelers out there like Time Warp. Back in 2024, he claims, well, of course, we don't know what's going to happen, but he claims he was from the year 2671. And in 2024, late that year, we were going to be in contact with ETs. I don't think that happened unless the government did that.
Yeah, you see, and that's the thing. You see these predictions that never come true. Right now, on TikTok and Instagram, there's all these, I'm a time traveler from, 3036 and I can prove it. And then they offer up these predictions over the, like what's going to happen over the next few months. And I've been following these for a couple of years now.
And what happens to them? What happens to those people that make the claim it's a few months later?
They change them. They push the dates back. There's one where he's always predicting that that there's going to be like a mass disappearance on the planet, and then these aliens are going to come down and claim to be responsible for the disappearances, but he keeps pushing the dates back. At one point it was like what was it? It's like you said, it was like August of 2024. Well, now it's it's going to be August of 2025, and after that passes, so you can't trust this stuff. And I wonder whether or not say you do have somebody that is able to time travel and make these predictions, is making the predictions going to be enough to alter it? Because now people are looking at it and, and expecting it to happen. Does that cause then that branch of reality to go off in a completely different direction?
Well, it created a new bubble. It could maybe create a new bubble. Right.
Well, you had like John Teeter, who who appeared on these chat rooms, and I think one of Art Bell's chat rooms as well.
No, he actually appeared. He actually appeared on one of Art's shows too, and made all these claims.
Right, and at the time, he said that this stuff was going to happen, but then when none of it happened as he said it was, he came back and he said that there could be the possibility that me coming back in the past altered my timeline, and that I'm never going to be able to go back to where I came from, because none of the stuff that happened to me when I was a kid has now happened. So, and he apparently didn't understand, or claimed not to understand, what was actually going on. So I don't know. I mean, the John Teeter story, I've always viewed somewhat, with as entertainment, rather than something that actually happened. But some of the things that he said was going to happen, this was going to happen like during the Obama administration, seemed like that, it could be heading in that direction, but fortunately it never did. You didn't have the Civil War and the Russians attacking us with atomic weapons, or it just, it pushed things, down the road a little bit. So, instead of happening in Obama's time, it's just going to be, 20 or 30 years later.
I don't know. It's just, again, it's so many people make these claims. And there's one guy who claimed, a time traveler, he claimed he was from 2030. And supposedly he claims he passed. Okay, he claims he passed the lie detector test and said Trump would be reelected. And then Trump, was reelected, was elected. But again, how many people come out there and make these outrageous claims? And, they get their couple minutes of fame. But again, even if you're coming out and saying, I'm a time traveler from 2040, this is what's going to happen. As soon as you say this is going to happen, it could create it not to happen and create another bubble. And that's the whole thing. So I don't know. I don't know how this stuff works. But I can tell you this. Yeah. I'm on a couple time groups on, different media. And I get these people when they find, oh, you're a talk show host. Then they start asking me questions about time travel. Like, I know it so many people believe it's real. They really do. There's a lot of people out there that believe time travel is real.
Oh, yeah. Well, and... I think a lot of people, and it's kind of the same thing with the UFO phenomenon, the idea that they are extraterrestrials, is that so many people have been brought up, with television shows and cartoons that deal with these subjects, that I think that once they reach adults, that they think that it's true, because they possibly aren't the most critical thinkers, out there, but just assume that because they saw these things, that there is a basis to reality to it and haven't been told otherwise. And then again, you have people think that time travel is real, but it's, it's a government conspiracy that they're keeping it secret from us, like they're keeping the flat Earth secret from us.
Well, you mean the Earth isn't flat? Don't wreck my weekend. I thought the Earth was flat. Oh my God! You just wrecked my whole weekend, and it's Mother's Day tomorrow.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Gary.
I already know the planet is box shape.
Box shaped. There you go.
It's box shaped.
The Bizarro planet in the old Superman comic books was box shaped.
But here's one thing, again, Andrew, claimed, when he was in this secret time travel training program for kids, why would they have taken kids for time travel and not adults? That's one thing that always puzzled me with Andrew on that.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact reason. I think that it was something along the lines of that, kids were more
open,
plastic, I suppose, with their state of mind, and are more easily accepting things like this, while adults would have problems, with the reality of non-reality, and just the whole process of going outside of this state of awareness and into another. Though, I mean, he did say, I do remember him saying that years ago that the process that they went through would leave them with future health problems, and that seems to have been the case with him.
Oh yeah.
He's and he even said years ago, the type of health problems that they told him he may develop, and that seems to have happened.
If they sit there and tell me, hey, when you're a kid, well, when you're a certain age, you're going to have this problem, this problem, this problem, then I would look at him and say, you know what? I don't want to go back in time. I don't want to go forward in time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was his dad was, I guess, one of the engineers.
Yeah.
That was a part of this project, and encouraged him to do this, for the good of the country, probably, something like that. And I've often wondered with somebody like Andrew, and again, going into this idea that time travel may actually change the timeline that you came from, considering the number of times that he supposedly did time travel, could it be that at some point that he came back to a world where none of this existed, and then he was trapped here? All right, see what I'm saying? He came back to our reality where the time travel experiments never happened. And that's why when he tells these stories, we look at him like, okay, sure, Andy, the companies existed, that he claimed were part of these government contracts. But as far as we know, and, there's a lot of corporate secrecy, but as far as we know, they never were involved in time travel experiments.
Well,
go ahead.
It makes logical sense. You remember the TV show? They rebooted it. I don't even know if it's still on, but Sliders.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. If you think about it, they're constantly sliding into another time, a bubble, another parallel universe, another time frame, and where everything is kind of the same, but not the same. Could you imagine that if you ended up and came back, the changes, there has to be some subtle changes. It would happen no matter what.
Yeah. Well, and that's why it makes me wonder whether or not these a lot of these time slips aren't something akin to sliders, but just somehow occurring naturally. Which, I mean, that's something that I think that physicists and scientists need to look into a little bit more closely. If these are natural events, how are they occurring? Why are they occurring? Because I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
All right. There were 4 people, 2 couples who are on vacation from England that they were ultimately going to end up in Spain. But they were going to drive through the continent and through France and then, go to Spain. At one point in France, they were looking for a place to stay and were told about this hotel, that probably had vacancies for them. And so when they finally found the place, it ended up being a very rustic hotel. There was no glass in the windows, just wooden shutters. The beds didn't have pillows. They had like a cloth-covered block of wood, I think is what they said. The doors didn't have locks, just wooden latches. They took pictures, but none of the pictures came out. In fact, there was no indication that the roll was even advanced through those points. It was like they took the pictures and it just never took. The next day they were having breakfast and there was a couple of gendarmes in the little restaurant that was attached to this hotel that were wearing extremely old-fashioned clothing. A woman come in dressed in what they said appeared to be like an evening wear, like she was going to a party and she was carrying a small dog. None of them considered these oddly dressed people out of the ordinary. They even asked the gendarmes the quickest way to get to the highway from there, and the gendarmes didn't understand the word highway, and just kept directing them to the little dirt road that the hotel was in front of. But the odd thing is that they paid the innkeeper, for their night's stay, which was extremely cheap, 5 francs at the most, and that included the meal. This guy took their money, took their French money, didn't even blink an eye. And nobody said anything about this weird car. There are no other cars in the area, by the way, they said. Just their car.
But don't you think, but Tim, if they were, everybody was getting around on horses, right?
Right.
And you have a car that you drove there and parked. Don't you think the people would be gawking and maybe getting a stake ready or 2 stakes and putting wood around it because they believed in witchcraft and have a barbecue without the barbecue sauce?
Well, according to their story, the date probably would have been like maybe the early 1900s.
Okay.
Maybe the late 1800s. No more than that. All right? But yes, you're exactly right, though. Why, first of all, why wasn't everybody gawking at it if it was a time slip event where they were in the past? Why weren't people saying, what is that? What is that strange thing? And why did they accept the money, modern money for payment? One of the things I forgot to mention, the story I talked about earlier about the gas station that seemed to be a part of a time bubble, is that another story with some people involved in it. They tried to pay for some snacks, and the cashier would not accept the money because they said it was counterfeit. And in fact, got on the telephone and was talking to an operator, kind of like, Claire, get me the police department, rather than dialing it themselves, and that kind of freaked these people out. So they just left the money with them. But yeah, I mean, in that case, the money was a sticking point. But with this case with the English couples in France, nobody seemed to blink an eye about it. So, was this an actual going back in time or going to a different reality?
Yeah.
But again, if it was a different reality, again, why weren't people, gawking at the car, and why did they accept the money?
Well, can I ask you a question? If you went into a hotel but you didn't have a car. And if you went in a hotel in 2025, in a rural area, and you came dressed as, like 1900s, aren't people going to be looking at you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly. But again, the people in the supposedly, past era didn't seem to notice how odd these modern day, English people, English vacationers seem to be. So, again, would it be a case where their perceptions of these vacationers were different than the reality? That instead of seeing modern day vacationers, they were seeing something that they would expect to be seen.
That could be the possibility, because I go back to what happened with me and my kids. Again, everybody in that place was staring and gawking and talking, and I felt so uncomfortable. That was my experience. So maybe in the case like that or other cases, when they look at you, they don't see you from, whatever the year they were from, like 2020 or 1990 or whatever year they were from. They're seeing them from the year that they're there. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
That's a heavy conversation right there, and it's nutsack.
It is. But obviously, though, in your experience, there must have been something off. Why would they be, gawking at you? If you all looked exactly like they did. So there must have been
in my
something.
case, if I saw them and I saw the cars and everything to me looked like, wow. And they're staring at us. They weren't seeing me dressed as them, for their era. They're seeing something strange. The same way I was seeing something strange with them.
Right.
Again, unless there was somebody putting on some type of, get together where everybody was dressed 20, 30 years in the past and drove old cars like that. But I tell you, I would never want to go back in that. Like a week later, honestly, we went back because I wanted to get some more pictures up by Mount Rainier, up a falls, waterfall. And naturally, my kids said, I'll go if we can stop and get that hamburger. Because it was, I have to be honest with you, every time I think about it, it was a huge hamburger back. Even then, it was huge. And, and we drove by back and forth. I couldn't find it. And when I stopped at the little store down by the state park, I mentioned to the clerk, I said, we stopped last week at this diner that, when I was a little kid, my parents used to stop at. And she looked at me, kind of turned funny color, and said that place burnt down years ago. And when she said that, it bothered me. So when we went back, sure enough, there was ruins of something that burnt down. There was blocks, concrete, and a bunch of, it was something that looked like a business or a building burnt down at one point. It was there. When I was driving up and down, I was looking for the diner, but that is a weird thing. Like I said, I wonder, Tim, how many people have had these things, and for some reason, they went missing and never made it back, or they ended up somewhere in limbo. That would even be worse, where they're not back in their current time frame, and they're kind of like, a glitch somewhere on a computer.
Well, Einstein talked about how we all have our own personal timelines in space-time. So, and you're there for, your period of time, and then you're gone. But like you said, what if something happens and you get off that track? What if you get off that timeline? Do you become stuck in a timeless state? Never realizing that you're in a bubble someplace, or do you just cease to exist?
That could be that you just right there you maybe don't exist anymore.
Right. I was going to say, when you found the location where there's just, like some blocks and stuff, if it had been a Twilight Zone episode, you would have found your money, neatly folded on top of a rock or something.
Well, I tell you, it's still, you know what, Tim, it still bothers me when I think about it. And it's still, even like my one son with me passed away, but my other son, and we talk about it every so often. We'll see something, movie or something, and we'll say, when we were going up to Mount Rainier, we start talking about it. It's eerie. It affects you for the rest of your life. It makes you realize there's more to this life, this world, than we even can comprehend.
Oh, absolutely. And I just recently ran across a story very similar to yours, where this couple had stopped at this diner at an unexpected location at night. They went in, there was nobody else there, but they said that the diner was very futuristic looking. It was like all metal. The plates, the silverware they said was like very fine, like thin, delicate types of metal. The plates, the waitress, there was only one waitress. She was dressed all in white and took their orders. The food was great. They paid, they left. They decided they wanted to stop there again later. Nothing there. And in fact, there had never been anything there anytime in the past. So, they were left to wonder whether or not it was like a weird UFO type of experience. But again, it's that same type of story that we hear time and time again, just like yours. There are differences, but it's like the plot is basically the same. The framework is the same. The details can be altered, for each experience, I think.
Yeah, but if you really think about this type of stories has been going on long before there was internet. It goes back for centuries and centuries and centuries. Our time is up, and when I get you on, we're in a time warp. You know that. Now, do you have what's your latest book? How can they find your books? And do you have a website? And also, where can they find your great podcasts?
Sure. Well, the podcast, I'm a co-host on the Paracast with Gene Steinberg, and it can be found on practically all of your favorite streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify, and the rest. Its website is actually theparacast.com, theparacast.com. Very simple. My latest book is called Weird Time. That's why we're here tonight talking about Weird Time. But it's called Weird Time, Exploring the Mysteries of Time and Space. And we have a lot of great people who contributed to this book, like Sean Casteel and Nigel Watson and Scott Corrales. Just some fantastic, people with it's just full of great information about the mysteries of time and space. And the website for it, you can find it at the weirdtimebook.com, not the word, weirdtimebook.com. And you can find information on how to get in touch with myself and the other writers, at that location. But if you want to go around that, you can always email me at trswartz@gmail.com. That's probably a quick way. And all my other books you can find on Amazon.
Well, Tim, I want you to have a great Mother's Day. Hopefully you bought flowers. I forgot. I didn't even realize. Don't tell my wife. She might be listening, but I didn't realize it till a couple hours ago when my daughter came up and she goes, "You didn't get Mom anything for Mother's Day."
Well, with my wife, she actually, if I would do something like that, she would say, "I'm not your mother."
Yeah. Well,
that's
mine
the kind of person she is.
Yeah. Well, mine treats me like She's my mother. Anyway, Tim, I want you to have a great weekend, what's left of it, okay, my friend? And thank you for coming back on.
My pleasure, Gary. I always have such a fun time talking with you. And, anytime you want me back, just let me know.
Well, we're going to call you back up and have you back on. Okay, my friend, you take care.
All right. Good night now.
Yeah. JC, what do we got coming up next week? What's going on?
Well, we got all kind of good stuff going on, but let me see. Starting off on the 15th, we got Mr. Richard Beckwith coming on, and he's going to let us know about his new book, Need to Know Law and Practice of American Society, or Secrecy, rather.
Yeah. What else do we got?
And then we don't have a show next Friday, but we do have a show on the 17th with Mr. Danny Newman. Newman is going to be talking about psychedelics and the afterlife.
Well, maybe if you use the wrong psychedelics, you might have an afterlife really fast.
Yeah. Anyway, it's like, I guess, use like a tool to tap into. It's pretty fascinating stuff. You'll like him.
Yeah. Well, we had a couple other people about like those subjects too in the past, haven't we?
Yeah, very similar. Yeah. It's been a while, but yeah.
You got anything planned for tomorrow?
Well, after the Mother's Day get together, I am going to try to go fishing and land. As you know, there's an 8-pounder that I've been feeding, but I haven't been able to land him yet. Got a 6 and a 7, but I'm going to try to get him this year, Gary.
Yeah, I've been hearing that for 8 years now.
I hear you. I get his little brothers, the 6ers and the 5ers, but the 8er, you did straighten out my hooks last year, but I got bigger hooks. Okay. Well, again, I want to apologize. One of the computers malfunctioned. And again, I'm so dependent on, technology. If one of the computers fail, I physically couldn't bring the video feed on. Thank God we still had the audio feed, but the video feed wouldn't go on. And I apologize to that. You had to look at my face for almost 2 hours, and I apologize for that. Boy, I tell you, my mouth I had oral surgery done here the other day, and I tell you, my mouth is killing me. And, between that and the heart attacks and all, I don't want to be old. Yeah, I'm only 37. Well,
now, wait a minute. Now, I'm only 37.
Yeah, well, you getting over 2 surgery and you're talking for 2-3 hours. That's not a good idea, I don't think, for healing.
Yeah, I had a craving yesterday. You ready for this? No, it wasn't about sex. You know what it was? I wanted a big old cigar.
Oh, God.
I wanted a cigar so bad. I was craving a cigar. I haven't smoked a cigar for 4 years. I haven't smoked anything for 4 years. Nothing.
If you want to get a dry socket on steroids, you just smoke that cigar, mister.
Yeah. Again, Barb and all that, I want to thank you for being a friend, and Andrew out there. And whoever else was out there, again, I want to apologize for no video feed, but please leave a good comment because our sponsors look at that. And again, give us a thumbs up. That's really important. And tell your friends about us. We're growing massively every week, thousands and thousands of new subscribers on YouTube. The same thing with Apple, iHeart, and TuneIn. We're just growing. It's got, and I tell you what, you guys need to buy me a cup of tea because it's getting really expensive. I had to break my kids' penny bank the other day to pay some of the bills for the show. Anyway, everybody have a good one. We'll catch you on the other side.
Available now. Bigfoot Origins, The Search for the Cryptid Homeland by Mike Dupler. This is the most comprehensive and in-depth examination of Bigfoot ever written. How did Bigfoot in North America, the Yowie in Australia, and the Woodwoes, Britain's Bigfoot, get to where they are today? Mike Dupler connects the dots, and the conclusions are incredible. This changes everything. Don't be left out in the woods, in the cold, not knowing. Read Bigfoot Origins, The Search for the Cryptid Homeland by Mike Dupler. Available now on Amazon. Do you have a mother with a weird sense of humor? We have the perfect solution to your potential gift-giving conundrum. Buy for Mom this great read, The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook. It's the latest book by Robert Guffey, author of Chameleon. In the pages of the handbook, you will learn about the dangers of allowing your fetus an in utero internet connection, the growing problem of terrorism in the womb, and the little-known fact that Shakespeare created pregnancy, among other esoteric secrets. The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook is available directly from Madness Heart Press and Amazon.com.
No infants were harmed in the making of this handbook.
The Expectant Mother Disinformation Handbook by